Hello YouTube, Carson Jacobson here, and I'm making a video today to have a little bit of a talk about music theory. Specifically, I wanted to talk about scales, or as you may know them, collections, but not like the major scales that everyone knows of, those easy ones. No, I will talk a little bit about those, but today I want to tell you how to make the really weird ones that you've never heard of. Namely the octatonic, the hexatonic, I'm ignoring the wrong note there, the whole tone, the pentatonic, and maybe any others I can think of along the way. With each scale, and I will be covering the diatonic major ones for just a moment, I'll tell you how to build it and just some thoughts that I have about it, and we'll just see how long it takes to get through them all. I will start with the most boring and proceed up to the craziest. So if you're not interested in the diatonic scales, then you can just go ahead and skip ahead a minute or so. And that's totally up to you. But let's go ahead and start with our diatonic collections. Now I should clarify for you music theory folks out there, remember that a collection is just any set of notes that you're using in your composition, and a scale is those notes specifically in ascending and descending order. So, let's start with your diatonic collection. How do you build it? Well, let's start with the major scale to be a little more specific. To build a major scale, you pick one note to be your tonic. In this case, we're going to do C because we can fit the whole C octave in the frame here. You then go up 2 semitones. You'll notice I skipped this one because we're going up 2 semitones. And then 2 semitones again, and then you only go up 1 semitone, and then 2, 2, 2, and 1. So to build your major scale, the semitone pattern is 2, 2, 1, 2, 2, 2, 1. Simple enough, even if it may not be the easiest thing to memorize. You may also know that as whole step, half, whole, 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 half. And that's where you get our major scale. That's just one representation of the diatonic collection, because we're using these notes in this order from C to C. Now, if we were to use the same notes but from D to D, it would sound different, but we're using the same collection. So we're still in a diatonic collection, but it's no longer a major scale. That's when we get into the subject of modes, which I'll do a whole separate video on another time. There's still a diatonic collection. The most popular other diatonic collection you know of, other than the major, is of course the minor mode, the Aeolian collection, etc. When working with the minor mode, you will commonly see a raised 6th note or a raised 7th note, even more especially. The most common form of minor that you'll hear is with the raised 7. And I usually do most of my writing in that, but that's beside the point. I think that's enough on the diatonic collection. Let's move on to the pentatonic collection. Penta, as you'll know, comes from a prefix for 5, and that's because this collection uses only 5 different notes. My hand was a lot bigger in the frame than I was expecting. Sorry about that. So, to build a pentatonic collection, there are 2 ways. I'll tell you them both. I prefer to build it based from the major scale. The major scale, so let's build our C pentatonic, for example. You have your notes in the major scale, the 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. The pentatonic scale will be using notes 1, 2, 3, 5, and 6 to give you a sound that's something like this. It's a little bit jazzy, more relaxed, laid back. The other way of assembling a pentatonic scale is by counting out the semitones or whole steps. You can't use whole step, half step, however, because there are no half steps. So just semitones today. So you start on whatever note you want to be your root, and then you go up 2 semitones, 2 semitones again, 3 semitones, and then 2 semitones, and then to get your octave, 3 more semitones. So the pattern to build your pentatonic scale will be 2, 2, 3, 2, 3. Now, naturally, just with the diatonic scale, you can put this in any other order. So instead of going from C to C, we could do the same notes, but from D to D. Gives it a little brighter sound depending on how you use it. This is also technically known as modes, but we don't have names for each of these modes that I've learned of yet. If you've learned of names for each mode, put them down in the comments section. I'd love to learn about them and do some research. There are considered to be major and minor versions. The major version is if we build it just like I showed you from the root. And then the minor version would be if instead you started on the 6th scale degree, but then use the same notes. So notes 6, 1, 2, 3, 5, 6. That semitone pattern would be 3, 2, 2, 3, 2. I pointed to each note, but my finger doesn't fall in the frame where it was. So 3, 2, 2, 3, 2. And that's your pentatonic collection. The least boring, but still kind of boring one that we're going to talk about now is the whole tone collection, which, as many of you may have figured out, uses only whole tones, whole steps. So you pick whatever note, and then you just go up whole steps until you reach the octave. Another way to call whole steps would be 2 semitones at a time, however you want to think of it. There are only 2 whole tone collections. There's that one I just showed you, and then if we use the other notes, those are the same type of collection, just beginning on different notes. There are only 2 of those whole tone collections, and if you put them together, they use all 12 of the chromatic notes. This one sounds new age, spacey, so if you wanted to make a sci-fi space travel movie, this is the music you'll want to look for when looking out over the vast empty space. Now for the real interesting ones. I'm going to do the hexatonic next and then end on the octatonic. The hexatonic, as you may figure out, has 6 notes, and there's a couple of different ways to build it. First, you could think of it as 2 augmented chords on top of one another. So you pick a note that you want to be your root note. We're going to go with C again, and you build an augmented triad on top of it. For those of you who don't know how to make an augmented triad, it's a major third and a major third. And then you take the augmented triad a half step above it. And then you just play those up in order. It's traditional to include the octave. And that's your hexatonic collection. The other way to build it is to start at whatever note you want the root to be, go up 1 semitone, then 3, then 1, then 3, then 1, then 3 again to get to the octave. You'll notice it's just alternating 3, 1, 3, 1 for the intervals between notes. That's very similar to our octatonic collection, the one we'll close on today, which alternates between 2 and 1. before I discuss more about that, I would like to point out, with the Hexatonic Collection, there are only 4 different Hexatonic collections. One beginning on C, one beginning on C sharp. I won't play these. And the half step being from C sharp to D, one beginning on D, one beginning on E flat or D sharp. And that's it. The reason being, once you begin on E, you're using the exact same notes that you were using when you began on C. If you can work out some reasons why that would be, go ahead and put them in the comments, but it really just boils down to that if you begin on E, you'll end up using the same notes as when you began on C. Our octatonic collection, as I mentioned already, alternates between semitone intervals 2, 1, 2, 1. Even though I said the 2 first, it actually begins on the 1. So we're going to start on C again, and then alternate 2, 1, 2, 1, or 1, 2, 1, 2 rather. The other way of building this is to take a fully diminished 7th chord and the fully diminished 7th chord a half step above it, and just smack those down together. There are only 3 octatonic scales, beginning from C, C sharp, one from C sharp D, and one from D, D sharp. Because again, if we were to begin on D sharp E, we would end up using the same notes as when we began on C, C sharp. As you can maybe possibly tell there. If we had a bit more time, I'd tell you some things about using these collections, notating them when you're analyzing. But instead I'll just end on, there are some weird sounds if you want to brag to your music theory friends or your music teachers that you know some cool stuff about music theory. These are some good things to use because they're very advanced and rarely used. If you enjoyed learning about these topics, music theory, go ahead and let me know so I can make more videos about contemporary music theory. That's what I'm learning about right now in my university studies, so I'm sure to have lots of content regarding these. Just let me know if you want to by leaving comments and likes on this video and telling your friends to subscribe. If you don't want this topic, then tell me what music topics you would be interested in, again, down in the comments. And I really hope that you have a wonderful day.